what do the fundamentals tell you about what on earth is happening with Bitcoin right now?
So most of the fundamentals that we deal with are early stage
I should
startups.
also say, but which fundamentals? Are there any fundamentals you can point to?
So most of the fundamentals we work with for early stage startups are related to all the things you'd see in any traditional software startup, right? We're looking at user growth, we're looking at transaction activity, depending on the particular company. Now, here for Bitcoin, when we're trying to describe or explain the price action, we always want to come back to one reason. But the reality is that there's a wide variety of market participants in crypto. And so I think that there's myriad factors at play simultaneously. You already touched on a few of those, but one of them is the lingering inflation concern.
Well, here's the thing. I want to channel my inner Katie Greifeld.
Sure.
Because she lives Bitcoin second by second.
Yeah.
And she basically points out no earnings, no cash flow, no underlying business for you to analyze. You actually just pointed out the opposite. Those are exactly the sort of criteria you're looking at when assessing Bitcoin's push higher.
Sure. So, I mean, for a lot of people looking at this, I think they're seeing there's still some concerns about inflation. So the idea of a scarce asset with a fixed supply has appeal. There's still some lingering banking concerns, even though the peak of the concerns have died down. But that increases demand for an asset that people can securely self-custody as owners. Right, so those are two of maybe the four reasons I'd say that are driving Bitcoin higher.
Hey, Caro, in the technology sector, whether it's equities, whether it's crypto, if in doubt, go back to inflation in the Fed.
I mean, that was always the argument. Was it an inflation hedge? That didn't seem to bear out from the numbers when we saw inflation, Spencer, but we do see it more of a buffeted about by the Federal Reserve and risk tolerance. What about institutional players? We were talking to Katie about that. Are they starting to be tempted to come back in when we see a 30,000 level?
Absolutely. I think for the institutional players, I mean, listen, we run a venture capital fund that invests in early stage companies. A lot of our limited partners in our fund are large institutional allocators, endowments, and pension funds. And an increasing number of them own crypto directly, primarily Bitcoin and or Ether. But then they also want additional exposure via venture capital funds that are invested in the space. So there is absolutely an appetite from them, but overall I would say that most of them allocated over the past couple of years and have not been adding more recently.
Go to ETH for us, because we are looking towards what is the continuation of the upgrade to more of a proof of stake concept. We're having the Shanghai upgrade tomorrow. In layman's terms, what does that mean? Do you expect there to be more volatility around the space?
I don't expect a lot of volatility, but in layman's terms, what's going on here is that the way that the Ethereum network is secured is by people providing or staking their capital, their Ether, into the protocol itself. They're rewarded for doing so financially, and what happens tomorrow is people are now able to withdraw the Ether that they have staked. So this only started a little over a year ago when we had the merge that proof of stake really came into being. And now what we're about to see is that people can withdraw the assets that they have staked. That said, from our conversations around the market, we're not seeing a lot of demand for people to unstake their assets. So we mostly think that this will be a non-event tomorrow.
Yeah, Spencer, many have been saying it feels as though the players who have staked their ETH, they're long-term committed to the space. But Ed, whether or not venture capital remains long-term committed to the space amid some of the debacles of last year, that's still the key question, particularly as they, are much more nervous to write checks.
Yeah, and that's where I would go to Spencer next, because we've been distracted by artificial intelligence. We've looked at volatility. I mean, as an asset class, Bitcoin still carries a lot of volatility, Spencer. The root of my question is, have any of the sort of psychological drivers in this market changed so far in 2023 when you think about the SVB fallout, or has the crypto community kind of just got on with it?
Mostly people have just gotten on with it, right? I mean, there are some new headwinds, I think, from FTX collapse that is presenting regulatory headwinds.
Right.
But overall, the industry is just pushing forward. It is much more organized than it has been historically, at least in terms of tackling some of these regulatory and political issues. So overall, what we're seeing is for venture capital firms, they're following the talent. And they're watching that there continues to be a flow of high-quality talent into crypto companies and crypto markets.
Spencer, you just mentioned there, though, that you got on with it amid the collapse of Signature, of Silvergate. I'm interested in the banking rails, though, and how much that has impacted liquidity.
It's certainly been an impact. I mean, several of the largest banks that were servicing crypto companies provided critical infrastructure for all of those companies to be able to exchange capital on a 24/7 basis. That's particularly important for crypto markets that operate 24/7, 365. Now some of those banks have been put out of business, and there is an open opportunity for someone to recreate the infrastructure that previously existed.